Alright guys, so I've been asked to take a look at Blender here and explain how to correct some of the models that we're working with in Unity. And we've had some issues here managing to get the normals to all line up and to make sure that they're being correctly imported. So I'm going to start with Blender here. We're going to fire it up. And I'm going to kind of go over some of the issues that we're seeing. But that's going to require a little bit of explanation of what we're looking at here. So, Blender's interface here is broken up into a number of regions, a number of different sections. And you'll notice each one of them has this icon, and usually in the bottom or top left of each one of the regions here. You'll see that I got a number of these. I got one on the top here too. And every single one of these can actually be completely rearranged. It's rather interesting actually if you go and look at it. So actually, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start by showing that you can right click on the edges between each one of the regions here, and I don't actually want this viewport here. I don't know why it's there. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to do what's called joining the area. You'll notice I got this little arrow that outlines each one. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse by joining this up. It basically just removes that region from the screen. And this applies to everything too. I can right click and join this one because I don't need that either. Now I'm left actually with a total of 3 regions. Now it looks like this is something more on the left here. It's a toolbar. Right, so this is actually still part of the 3D viewport, but I'm going to toggle that off. I'll explain more about it in a second. So I'm left with my menu bar along the top here, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it's the info bar, yeah. So then I got, what's this on the right? You are the properties bar. And actually, I made a mistake here. I wasn't supposed to get rid of that other option, so what I need to do actually is there should be a properties bar and an outliner on the right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to split the area. Notice how I have this nice bar here that appears. I'm going to stick it right there. And it splits it so you have the same type of region on both sides now. And I'm just going to change this back to being an outliner. Now, I'm going to explain each one of these in turn here. The 3D viewport obviously is where you're going to do most of your work. It's going to show your models and everything, and right now I'm kind of rotating the view by holding down my middle mouse button and dragging it around. I can also hold down Shift and the middle mouse button, and that allows me to pan the viewport. Now, let me explain what else we're looking at here. The outliner on the right here, this is actually a collection of all of the objects within the scene. And you'll notice when I click on each one of them, it's going to highlight that individual object. So I actually have a camera, I have a cube, and I have a lamp. This is kind of your default setup in the viewport. For what we're doing, since we're importing this into a game engine, we don't actually need the lamp up here, and we don't need the camera. These are more related to dealing with rendering out a still image or a video. They're used for that, because you normally render from the camera's perspective. Now, I can just as easily delete these. I'm just hitting the delete key and clicking left clicking to confirm that I actually want to carry out that operation, and I can actually select them directly in the viewport by right-clicking on them as well. So I'm just right-clicking on each one of these objects, but it works the same to actually select them from the outliner over here. It's the same thing. So we'll delete the lamp too, because I don't need it for right now. Now, you'll notice also that I have the properties dialog here, and I have these other sub-options on the properties. Now, I don't have anything selected right now, so it defaults to selecting the entire scene object here. So I'm going to go ahead and select this object, because I'm more interested in the properties on that right now. Now, by default, it's going to show you the render tab on the properties, but I'm going to skip over most of these, and I'll go over them in more detail later if you guys want more explanation. But what I'm actually interested in typically is going to be the object properties and the mesh properties. these are these two guys. We'll come back to them in more detail later, but suffice it to say that everything in a 3D file is broken down into a whole object and the individual parts of the object, like the vertices and edges and faces that make up an object. So that is all kept in the mesh data here. The object is a container for that mesh data. So it's kind of a conceptual separation there. Anyway, let me actually explain what's going on here. Since I said we're concerned with the normals on the object, I'm just going to operate, actually, you know what, I'm going to delete the cube too. And we'll start completely from scratch here, just so we're all on the same page. Now, you have multiple ways of accomplishing anything in this program, just like most programs, but I'll kind of show you a couple different ways here. I want you to notice that there's this grid in the middle of the viewport, right? I also have this little crosshair right in the center. That crosshair is known as the 3D cursor. I can actually reposition it by left-clicking at points in the viewport. Now, you'll note here, there's a distinct problem with working with a 3D cursor. No matter where I set it, I can't actually control how far back in space I'm setting it, right? Like, I can't control the Z depth from my viewport. So, the way that you kind of have to work with the 3D cursor is to set it, rotate the view, and then set it again, and that kind of gives you a much better point at where it's supposed to sit. So there's actually another way to handle this too. You have multiple views here, like I can go to the left view or the right view, or I'm sorry, left or front view, and I can kind of do the same thing with setting the 3D cursor. And this is important because the 3D cursor is where any object operation occurs. So if I want to add an object into the scene, it's going to by default be placed at the 3D cursor. Okay, so what I actually want to do here is get to talking about meshes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a mesh into the scene here, and I'm just going to add a cube in again. And the cube will be placed, as I said, at the 3D cursor. Now, Blender is a very keyboard-heavy program. You really need to work with the keyboard a lot in order to get things done efficiently, but I'm going to try to gloss over doing a lot of the keyboard commands right now, just for simplicity's sake. What I will mention them each briefly as I go, though, but there is reference for this as well if you need to look it up. The add command up here is actually the same as me going and hitting Shift A. Shift A will bring up a little menu, and most of the keys on the keyboard actually have similar menus. Like the W key is my specials menu, I've got a U key, I've got all kinds of extra context menus here. So the keyboard is very, very useful. You just have to kind of know what is the most useful thing to do in any given situation, but that basically just comes with practice. Now, Blender is modal. There are different modes you can be in to work from, and the two that I'm most concerned with at the moment are going to be the object mode, which is the default. That's when you're manipulating entire objects within the outliner or within the scene here. There's also the edit mode. Now, edit mode is object specific, so you need to be on the object you want to work on first. That needs to be selected. Now, I'm going to mention the A key here. You'll notice that the object is highlighted in orange currently. That means it's selected. If I hit A, it's going to deselect it. The A means all, or select all, and this will toggle on and off what's actually selected. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click on the object to select it again. And I'm going to flip this into edit mode here. And this is actually the same thing as hitting the tab key. I can actually tab in and out of edit mode. Now, you'll notice when I flip into edit mode here, it's now drawing the individual vertices, and the entire object is highlighted in orange. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit A to toggle things, and you'll notice I still have individual vertices being drawn here, the little points on the edges, right? And I can right-click and select the individual vertex. Now, I can also, similar to most selection programs, I can hold down Shift and I can right click while holding shift and I can select multiple vertices. Now I'll just deselect that last one. So now I only have these 4 top ones selected. Now these 4 vertices together make up this face on the top, right? I also have these 4 edges selected. So right now I can actually do operations that will affect any of the 4 vertices, and I can also affect the edges, and I can also affect the face. And you need to remember that each one of these is important for certain types of operations. And I'm just going to mention one of them real quick here. I'm going to hit the E key, and E starts an extrude operation. Now I'm just going to move the mouse up and down a little bit here. And if I left click, it's going to confirm the operation. And then extrude basically works on any face. Let me do it over here too, just to kind of illustrate. So E, pull the mouse out, and left click to set it. So basically I can pull out any of the faces, and that will add each of these individual faces around the edge of it, right, in order to pull the face out and keep it as part of a whole mesh. Now, the part I actually wanted to talk about here was kind of what faces mean, because in a game world, all of your objects are constructed out of polygons, right? So we are not actually concerned with edges. Edges are actually a made-up construct within Blender. They're useful for doing certain types of editing operations. Like one of them, I can extrude a face, but I can actually also extrude an edge. So I just hit E while I have that single edge selected, and now all I've done is just pull out that edge. So I can Control Z to undo that, and then I'm going to, well, we're going to pull out these toolbars on the side here. You'll notice that there's a little plus hanging off the edge of the screen here, so I can actually pull these out if I want to resize them a bit. But I have these 2 toolbars on either side of the screen. I can kind of scroll up and down them to see more information, but both of these are actually toggleable using the T key. T as in Tango, and N as in November. So I'm going to leave both of these open for right now, and I'm going to kind of explain them, because you'll notice that I have all of these additional tool buttons along each one of these. The one on the left here, the mesh tools, is extra operations that I can do. Like, I'm going to hit A to deselect everything again, and then I'm going to use this knife tool here just to kind of show you what's available. Knife is a new feature in Blender 2.63, so make sure that you're using the latest build if you want to have this available. But I can use the knife tool to split a face into multiple parts if I want to. I'm going to hit Enter to finish it, and you'll note now that I have this nice little subface that I've cut out, and I can actually manipulate that independently if I want to. This is just one of the possibilities that I could do. I'm just going to Control Z to kind of undo that whole operation here. We'll take it back to a simpler version. I can also, I'm going to hold down Control and left click and drag, and that's going to draw a selection box. And then I can grab all 4 of these in a much simpler method than having to go through and manually click them. So, useful trick, remember that, it's hold Control, left click and drag. And then I've selected all those. So actually what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit X, and I'm going to delete all of these vertices. And now I've removed that whole section of 5 faces and the attached edges and vertices that were coming off of those vertices. So now I'm left with a hole in the mesh here, so I'm going to patch that up really quick. I'm going to right click and select the individual vertices again. I'm going to hit F, and F will fill in the face attached to those vertices. Now, I'm still left with my double height box here, and let's talk a little bit about normals. Now, inside of the program, you'll notice, actually I'm going to undo this real quick. We're going to get rid of that face, and I want you guys to notice that I can actually see inside the box right now. Now, this is a trick. Blender treats all faces as double-sided. This is actually something I can control here, but this isn't actually the way that it it works inside of a game. This is how most games would display it. There's a trick in 3D graphics called backface culling. Backface culling basically means I'm not going to render it if it's facing away from me. And you'll notice I can see this face on one side. Well, I can't see it on this side, and I can see it from this side. That's because the normal on the face is pointed out this way. Now, the backfaced culling is on this display rollout on the right panel. So remember that that's there. It's not necessary, but it's useful to kind of visualize what's happening. And I'm also going to turn on mesh display here of normals. And I want to see face normals. So this is a little icon for a vertex and an icon for a face. And I can actually kind of scale up the size of the normals if I want to make them easier to visualize. But the point here is you can kind of see them sticking out of the face. You'll notice on the right side here how it's not coming this way, it's coming this way, right? So that means that this is the side that's facing out, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit A to select everything, and I'm going to, where are you? I know you're here. I'm going to recalculate the normals. I'm going to, well, recalculate will basically make all normals on the mesh try to face the same direction. What I mean by that is facing outwards. It's going to try to figure out what is inside the mesh and try to make everything face out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit flip direction. Since I have everything selected, it's going to flip it inside. Now, this is kind of weird the first time you look at it, but what I'm seeing is I'm looking through the box and seeing the face on the inside of it, right? So that's why there is no face here, right? Because I'm looking through this face and seeing these guys. Okay, so that's normals. What we want in most game engines, for almost every normal model, you want to have the faces outward. So this normal display here is it's kind of a debugging trick. You'll never actually see this rendered in a game engine or inside of a final render in Blender. This is only useful really for kind of figuring out what's going on with your model. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this up by selecting them and hitting F again, and you'll notice I have a little normal drawn there. I'm going to turn off my normals because I don't actually care about those. And I'm left with one object here. I'm going to flip myself out of edit mode, flip myself back to object mode. And you'll notice here, I just want to point this out, that I can't see that interior edge anymore, right? If I hit tab again to take myself back into edit, I'm going to grab that edge and we'll just pull it out here a little bit. I'm just grabbing the edge. Grab is the G key. It just lets you move any of your selected vertices. And now if I flip it back into object mode, you can kind of see the edge there, but you can't see it here. So the edges exist whether or not you actually see them in object mode. Just remember that. And the kind of the cardinal rule here is that the more edges there are, the more vertices there are, the more complicated it is to render, and the harder it's going to be for a game engine to display it in real time. So basically, you want to use as few points, as few vertices as possible to actually render an object convincingly to make it look good, while still making it perform well. So, last but not least, I'm just going to go ahead and save this. It doesn't really matter where you save it here, I'll just save over that. But normally for a Unity project with the game engine we're using, you would save this into the Unity assets directory, and that would allow you to load it into Unity and use it as a model in the game. And that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions.